So on me, right? So it's on me, and we're ready. And hello, everybody, and welcome to the second edition of the interim host with the actual host, Wrestling Paradox Podcast. I am your boy, Chris Slauson, and this
is the best looking podcaster ever.
Okay, well, you know what? Do we have to do this again, Chris? Because we didn't talk about that. I didn't know you were going to, I was putting you over, and then you went over.
I put myself over, Daddy.
Hey, that's why you're in the wrestling business. Your business for yourself, bro. All right, so to get into it, we're doing Brian Pillman. We brought you Owen Hart last week. This is the Brian Pillman episode. We are very excited. Owen Hart was good, but dude, I think I needed a full day to get reconstructive surgery on my jaw from putting it back after the Brian Pillman episode, for sure. But before we get to that,
he's one of my favorite wrestlers of all time.
No question. Like super underrated, talent wise, and then I mean, we'll get into
creative, bro.
Dude, it's insane. And which is insane about the episode. Like you were just watching, and you're like, this guy is the best ever. But everything else is crumbling, but he's the best fucking thing ever. Dude, it was nuts. But anyway, before we get into that, because I clearly we're already excited. M&J Ecological. If you got pests, iguanas, snakes, anything like that in your backyard and you want them out, M&J Ecological, number 305-697-2258. Sorry, Marcus, it's been a week. I'll get your number down in a couple weeks. M&J Ecological, 305-697-2258. I'll even do the graphic twice for you when we put out the episode, Marcus. You're the man. And always a shout out to my boys. My cousin's a wrestler there. I don't know if you know him. His name is Miami Mike. Very talented.
That's where the resemblance comes from. I see it. I see it now. Yeah, CCW. Follow him on all our social media platforms. Coastal Championship Wrestling on Facebook. Twitter is CCWFL. Get your tickets.
Dude, that show is absolutely insane. And if you're not part of it, you should be, because then you'll be like, remember when you got older and you were like, you watch ECW documentaries, you're like, oh man,
I wish I was there. Yeah. Yep.
Well, CCW not only provides you a school to be as good as Miami Mike, but it also provides you some quality wrestling content in a time where that's not a thing anymore. So you want to check it out. If you're in the South Florida area, if you're in the Nashville area, August 28th, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but August, around that time, you're also going to want to be up there at Helios Granite for the next Nashville show. If you are in the Treasure Coast, that's what they call it up there. Port St. Lucie. Go to Port St. Lucie. It's a great show.
Patriot Games,
Headbangers, dude. So much going on.
You're forgetting June 19th, Summer Glory. Fort Lauderdale.
Yes, sir.
Indoor Action Park. You got the man, Mr. Get My Shit In, Brian Cage.
But he might have to lose that, because CCW is clearly becoming the Get Our Shit In company, because, brother, we are getting our shit in, and it looks good, and be a part of it. So, with no further ado, dude, I have so many things to say about however you want to unpack this episode, dude. It was absolutely incredible.
We had so many what ifs last episode with Owen Hart. I think this number for Brian Pillman's what ifs surpasses it by mountains, leaps, bounds. Evil Knievel jumping over a river. That's just such a talent that just fell by the wayside.
Ruthless aggression, Brian Pillman. Vince McMahon would have had to sit down and just close the door. There would have been a day where Brian Pillman would have just had the best everything. We wouldn't have, wrestling would just shut down, because you wouldn't have gotten better than that. I don't know what a Brian Pillman fucking Eddie Guerrero ruthless aggression like angle would have looked like, but I would have needed a colostomy bag at a very young age if I was watching that shit, dude. Like, the possibilities are endless, like you say. But dude, it's not even like we were shorted amazingness while he was alive, because clearly we weren't. He was fucking amazing and super. I don't know. Maybe do you think Do you think he's one of those talents where guys our generation and up are still really appreciative of? And I think the what they call this the universe generation, but I feel like it's the network generation. So really, you're only going and diving into old stuff if somebody tells you, or you're not really appreciating. I feel like Brian Pillman had to be watching weekly to really appreciate how real he made things seem.
Well, you also have to realize that in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, when he was coming up in the NWA, WCW era, that was around the time of like Jim Herd. And who was the other guy that owned WCW at the time, where he outlawed, jumping over the top rope?
I mean, that was the Bill Watts era, right?
Bill, yeah. So Brian Pillman kind of went against that because what was his finishing move? It was the flying crossbody.
Yeah.
He innovated. He was the CM Punk of like 2008 to 2017 CM Punk in the 80s and 90s. Like he didn't care. He wanted to perform for the fans.
Well, you know what? That was actually mentioned at a part in the documentary because you mentioned the CM Punk thing and how much heat CM Punk has even with wrestling fans, like legit heat, like a Stephanie McMahon heat, or where it transcends the actual product, where you're like, oh fuck that guy because of who he was. Guys were, I mean, guys now, like somebody, I forget who it was that said it, but they were like, well, guys now like our age like to be like, oh, Brian Pillman was the best ever. But if you were watching as a kid, you absolutely despise that guy. And just even more of a credit to how good he was and how ahead of his time he was.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like, he was such a mastermind of the business, and that was with him not being in the business for so long. I mean, look who he had matches with. He had matches with Ric Flair, also sided with Ric Flair. He had matches against Arn Anderson, sided with Arn Anderson. So it was like he was accustomed to greatness. And during that time, you didn't see young guys get pulled into the greatness that often.
No. And it was special when you did. And you look at all the guys that did, like, because you mentioned Ric Flair and Arn, and those guys really only, because this was a time when their locker room was so competitive, but like in a different, like, because Stone Cold mentions it too when he's forced to tag with him, where he's like, I wasn't happy, like I wanted to do my, like people were very much into, you're not taking my spot, whatever spot me, I'm holding his truth. And Ric Flair, I mean, Ric Flair is Ric Flair, so you can guarantee that Ric Flair was the best at playing that game. So for a guy like Rick or even Arn, who fucking in 2021 still kayfabe shit, like you can imagine being told, Arn Anderson being told, hey, work with this kid real quick and make him look good. Like, dude, who is this kid? Why he looks better than me? He's younger than me, so why the fuck would I do that? So like, so dude, in a time for them to grab him, and you look at other guys that they did that with, which Sting is the obvious one because Ric Flair had so many programs with Sting, and they're all amazing. Because people didn't do that really with Steve Austin. Steve Austin worked with Steamboat a little bit here and there, and had some because I think Dusty liked him, but dude, young guys that we look at as legends were not getting picked or agreed to work with Ric Flair on a random TV. Like, dude, that just didn't happen.
Yeah, you touched on it about Stone Cold, Stunning Steve.
Yeah.
My theory on that, why they got paired up together, is I think they wanted to pair him up to get him unhappy, so they didn't get over. So they have him a reason to fire him, and everything. But those two personas put together to make up the Hollywood Blondes, it electrified. You wanted to hate them, but you had to like them.
Right. They were very much. They mentioned in the documentary as well, like DX. They were very much that DX. What are these guys doing? I don't like it. It's different, but dude, they look good doing it. They look badass. Like they're the epitome of what like a badass, like an anti-hero is supposed to be in a time where it was more yin and yang. It was just bad or good. There was no like tweeners or like anything like that. And yeah, dude, it's crazy. Like you think about and it was crazy to me that Steve Austin mentions that all that stuff, a lot of the stuff for the character and stuff was Brian's idea, because
that was so gnarly to me too. That was so gnarly to me.
Because now in 2021 we know the mind that Stone Cold has for this business. And I was going to mention that Stone Cold grew up wanting to be a wrestler. Brian Pillman is one of those guys. Brian Pillman and that strength coach could not be more wrestling business than the wrestling.
So corny.
But they never had anything to do with it, never knew anything about wrestling. Like Brian just fell into it, and it's just, dude, those two personalities are so fit for the business, but they weren't really, like, if you think about it, that wasn't what they thought they were gonna do.
Right.
It was nuts. So like Brian comes up with all these ideas that we look at today that are amazing, and none of those were Stone Cold's ideas.
Like the chain.
And Stone Cold wore that for, dude. You remember like Attitude Era Steve Austin?
Just the vest, no shirt, chain,
dude.
I
think that was the one that Brian gave him.
I believe so too. Yes.
Yeah.
But it just blew my mind, like you were saying, is Brian Pillman came up with all these ideas just driving, and I think it caught Steve off guard because you can see that when he was talking about it in this episode, you see he was taken back by it. He was just like, oh, well, I guess you're right, and it was such a crazy transformation though, before they were tag teams, because Brian Pillman put Z Cavaricci pants on the map. Like he put the Bengal print pants on the map, and then all of a sudden they get tagged, they get put together, and it's just this character just turned all the way up.
You don't miss it. You don't miss, because he always had the greatest gear ever in his singles run. It was different. He obviously had a different look, but and then the tag team look is a completely different. They had to, which was even smarter on Brian's part, dude. Like he didn't bring Stone Cold down by doing his thing, and then Stone Cold had to come up to him. They started, looking like, dude, fucking just being like around wrestling, and it just clicks in your head how genius these ideas, and like psychologically, like why, like, dude, so rare that's a thing.
Yeah, and just how they played off each other, like with their charisma and everything like that. The whole movie camera thing, and everything like that. You didn't see that. You never saw taunting like that in a tag team. I mean, Butch Reed and Ron Simmons didn't do that. You never saw that kind of charisma.
Even like Arn and the Andersons, or any Horseman combination of tag teams. They were attitude-y, they were badass, but you never saw that. They were still like they were still very much into making themselves seem like these are athletes that are come out here and they're gonna fucking match, basically.
Yeah, it's like transcended the tag team wrestling division because it gave the teams personalities.
Yeah. Because I had mentioned recently, I was watching Smoking Mountain stuff yesterday, and it's very two guys, competition. Like it's two guys in these competitions, and you kind of let the match speak for itself. They usually have a manager. Like you think about it, it was just them going up and doing their thing, and it became I think it was really the start of like the flashy badass tag teams.
Yeah, for sure. The tag team their tag team together also could have been the detriment of their run in WCW, because once the people that were out with injuries came back, and then they got tagged up and everything like that, those are bigger names, those are bigger draws.
And we go back to, who are these young guys? I don't care how good they look. I'm here now. I've been here longer. Like, screw them.
Well, because they said it in the documentary. It was Arn and Rick versus the Hollywood Blondes, and I guess they didn't have a good match.
It didn't sell or something like that. They didn't really draw it, and I feel like, but like that happens so much, and like back then, like now it's a little easier to really like analyze who doesn't draw and who doesn't. But like they were hitting so many towns back in the day. Like, did you not just, were off nights blamed on the boys, like, or was it just blamed on fucking Podunk, fucking
Poughkeepsie?
Yeah, like wherever the fuck you're at that night, that there was like one tractor flipped over on the one road they had to get to the gig. Like, I don't know. I feel like today that's more of a justified argument than back in the day when they were on the road all the time.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's Wha- it, it's kind of hard to put into words what I'm trying to say. They had the bad match with Rick and with Arn, and I touched on earlier saying that maybe they were put together to get them fired, to not draw. They have one bad match, and
And
it's like that's it.
it is. Yeah.
Yep. They can't hold their work. They can't hold the work that we're giving them, and everything like that.
Just that one bad employee. Oh, they're late. Oh, sick. Call them into my office. They're done now.
Yeah, and it leads to their firing. And what happens next between both of these guys? And I know we're not talking about a Stone Cold episode, but transcended the wrestling business.
Yeah.
They go to in the mid 90s, an obsolete company, only a regional company.
Yeah.
They work for the said company. They work for ECW for what? I think it was like a month, 2 months.
Yeah.
Cut the most hellacious promos ever.
Yeah.
And get hired to the WWF.
Yeah.
Without touching anybody in ECW.
Well, who gets hired first? Because
Stone Cold gets hired first.
I think Stone Cold leaves first too, right? Because he leaves first, and then Brian Pillman does the thing with Bobby Heenan, which is also fucking genius. Just that, like, I have a match. They know I'm gonna go out there for a match. I know this guy's a real human being. He's gonna do something. That's how, dude. All of that, and the working the boys thing, and this will be a topic that is very dear to my heart, because there's you can't find a modern wrestling podcast or a modern wrestling show with maybe like a guy from back in the day, back in the heyday of the business, Jim Cornette, talking.
Oh, I forgot my tennis racket. Hold on.
Yeah. Can you get your goofy tennis racket that'll make the business seem cartoonish?
Yeah, let me go get the cuckold off my wife. Hold on 1 second.
Oh, that one. Yeah. And then we'll tell everybody else they're killing the business. Like that was a big point for me. I remembered that. Like, I was like, so he's a genius. I mean, he is. That's great. I love it. But what is the difference between that and pulling the veil? Like, what am I supposed to think there? That clearly wasn't part of the show, especially in 94, 95, when Bobby Heenan said, "What the fuck are you doing on Southern television, dude?" That's absolutely not part of the show. You don't need to be a mathematician to tell you that's not part of it.
And what blew my mind was nobody knew. Nobody knew. And Pillman just went over and started messing with Heenan. Knew Heenan had a broken neck, was recovering from having neck surgery, and Heenan just snapped. Again, that's something else you never saw in the wrestling business. You never saw wrestlers interact with announcers during a match.
Pushing buttons, like that was something that when people talk about like how great it was that the Attitude Era came to be, that was the same thing, dude. That was pissed off guys, like taking their little shots, sunny days. Well, I forget the other ones, but on live television where you have a live mic still and not everything's scripted. And that's just, dude, that was all Brian Pillman. The genesis of that was fucking Brian Pillman. And that scene was also the point in the documentary where I got legit sad for like 3 minutes that strength and conditioning coach is not part of the wrestling business. Yeah. I was like, this guy is amazing. He's like, fuck him, do whatever you want.
He goes, Brian, what are we ultimately getting the wrestling business for? To make money.
Yeah.
Dude. Go back to this Eric Bischoff and ask for more money.
Yeah.
He goes, here we go. You ready for this analogy? Brian Pillman was Jeff Jarrett before Jeff Jarrett was Jeff Jarrett.
There's so much that Brian is not credited for. And I feel like this strength and conditioning coach should be discussed for the Hall of Fame eventually, just for the fucking interview. Because
he's gonna get in the Cauliflower Alley Club and didn't even have a match.
Dude, amazing. Yeah, like nuts. And then he does that and he gets what he wants. And then he realizes, like, I half think, because we obviously all know how this story goes. I half think, and usually this is how it goes. Same thing with Shawn Michaels. Same thing with a lot of guys that go down this route. I feel like that was half. He knew what he was doing, but it also fucked him over because then how do you top? Like if one of the last things he did was make Bobby Heenan say fuck on television, or like one of the last things he did was the gun thing, but like, dude, where do you go? The first thing in that character is Bobby Heenan saying what the fuck. People are shitting their pants. Like, and then you go on ECW and you ramp it up even more.
Oh.
And then you get on
his original promo in ECW was by far one of the best promos. Besides the pipe bomb, it was probably one of the best promos.
Because I also regard Shane Douglas's "You Can Kiss My Ass" one as one of the.
He throws down the title, yeah.
Throws down the title, but this one, the intensity, the realness behind it. Shane Douglas had realness behind it too, but I feel like this had more. Like, it was dude, crazy.
You know what blew my mind is, you talked about Jim Cornette and how he was in this documentary. He was like a really big presence in the documentary too. I was very surprised that he wanted to be in this documentary, because even though it is Brian Pillman, but it has been documented that Brian Pillman and his strength and conditioning coach was feeding information to these dirt sheet riders, to the Dave Meltzers, to, and it just blew my mind that the connection that Brian Pillman and Dave Meltzer had.
But that was also good too, because then he cuts Dave off.
Yeah.
He says he didn't know that shit.
Yeah. It just like, and just going back to Eric Bischoff's incident, where he played Eric Bischoff to be like, oh yeah, it's a storyline, it's a storyline, this, that, and the other. Oh, okay, I'll fire you.
That one I felt, because dude, you never know with Eric Bischoff. You even listen to him speak and you're like, what's going on in your mind? But
because he's snarky,
but he's been caught enough times where he just will blatantly lie.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And that's the rep he has. So I was like, because that's what I was waiting for. I was waiting for Brian's side and the strength and conditioning coach being like, dude, ask him for your release. That's ridiculous, right? Like, he's not going to do that. They thought he wasn't going to do that because Eric Bischoff is who Eric Bischoff is not an idiot. Right. So like, I was waiting for the cut to the Eric Bischoff interview, and there was going to be like, because I think Eric Bischoff plays with the truth because I don't know if he wants to or it's just something he does, but I think he plays with the truth because he wants to feel like he's doing that. He's
still in charge. Yep.
He's playing with the boys too. So like, I was waiting for Eric Bischoff to be like, look, I gave him the release because this is insane. And then I release him. We do something with it. And then whether he comes back or not, I do this, like, because they were all about just fucking like chop blocking the competition, or like doing these more so than the WWF at the time. I think when it got later and later in WCW's run, that is when Vince finally like started being okay with like shooting back on them. But at that time, Eric Bischoff was the one like, let's fuck with these guys a little bit. So I was waiting for but like, you're just telling me Eric Bischoff got played. It was so weird to me.
Yeah, I was like, I mean, but again, it could go back to they wanted him gone anyways, right. Even though the loose cannon was coming up, and it was skyrocketing. I think they wanted him gone because he wasn't a Ric Flair, he wasn't a Arn Anderson, and also, I mean, quite frankly, he wasn't a Chris Benoit or Dean Malenko.
No. But he could he could put a match together with what he knew how to do.
Yeah.
Which is also the mark of a great guy, because you look at a lot of the people that are regarded as Hall of Famers as they're working with what they got. Like,
well, if you really look at it though, once Bischoff took over, he had those ties with New Japan, All Japan, and everything like that. So you had, and AAA, you had Juventud Guerrera come in, you had Dean Malenko, you had Rey Mysterio and all that. Here's the first what if for the show. If Brian would have stayed, where would he have fit into that puzzle?
Yeah.
You see, so it's almost like it's Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde. I can agree with Eric Bischoff, like, oh yeah, we'll bring him back, this, that, and the other. It'll be a story, this, that, and the other. But then the evil is like, well, it's less salary. we don't have anything. You know, it's because I mean, look at the time frame. Like right when he left, it was like 95, 96.
Yeah.
You had Juventud Guerrera, you had Psychosis, you had Rey Mysterio, Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko, Chris Jericho. Where would Brian Pillman fit into that?
I think I agree. I completely agree with you. I think that there was I don't know, maybe because I don't think it ever really happened, but I do agree that I don't think that I think that would have been too much of a clash of styles and too much of Brian not growing up wanting to be in the business to where he can adapt to that. Because you look at guys like I brought up Shawn Michaels a couple times in this one, but the personality kind of is parallel.
Oh yeah,
Shawn Michaels grew up wanting to be a wrestler. He's still an American guy. He played football. He's an American wrestler, super athletic. But I feel like you put 6'1", 96 Shawn Michaels in there with Hoovy, and it's a 5-star match. But I feel like Brian, it's a little bit more. It has to be a little bit more storyline, a little bit more Gaga, if you will, a little bit more. So, and you know what I was gonna say about the New Japan thing? Definitely not AAA. I don't think AAA ever even looked at him as a possibility. And in Japan, it was all Japan at the time. Like New Japan was running too, but that time for Japan wasn't as I feel like New Japan now, even a little bit of All Japan is more the Japanese guys have embraced the gimmicky, still have amazing matches, but more elaborate presentation.
mm-hmm.
Like I feel like Brian Pillman, New Japan now is the US champ or some shit with Moxley and tearing down the house. But like, and obviously barring his injuries and all that shit, he probably wouldn't have even been working today. But like,
can you imagine right now 95, 96 Brian Pillman going against Rocky Romero in New Japan?
Dude, yeah, it would be insane. Like it would be nuts. So but back then I feel like that wasn't a viable option either. And I don't know. I don't. It's interesting. We brought up that Stone Cold was already gone. So, like, do you think that because they saw, because Stone Cold was also kind of doing that with ECW when he got there.
Mm-hmm.
He was fucking riffing. He was insulting everybody. He was coming out and fucking talking shit and just letting loose. And
he dressed up like Hulk Hogan.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite ones.
Yeah.
When people dress up like Hulk Hogan, it's my favorite thing. When Shawn Michaels did that for the SummerSlam one of the funniest things I've ever seen. But so do you think that it was because of that they looked at it and the guys in creative or the bookers in WCW were like, this isn't going to go anywhere. Like, he's just going to do this. Like, where does this go from here? Like, I think they saw it ahead of time to where, like, he's just got to do more of that. And we're not going to do more of that. So what do we do with it?
It was kind of like they're like, well, you see what he did over there in that syndicated TV show, you know, that's wrestling show. He's never gonna get over. Oh, Brian's gonna follow his footsteps. Just let him go. Let him go.
Oh yeah, and then that even more like back then in the wrestling business, especially if somebody already is doing something like that. Dude, like the 90s were riddled with comparisons, especially because you had the two brands. So like, I feel like they were like, he's going to do that again. Then what do we have? You know, like they're just going to turn to the other channel. Like, did you imagine? Well, I got another what if. Fuck. I just thought of it right now. If Brian Pillman is the third man.
Oh.
But he wasn't a huge face. But I feel like if he was the third man still, I feel like there's still, or even because that coincides with the timeline of him leaving. So I feel like if there was, this is just straight up fantasy booking now, but like if Eric Bischoff lets him go and then starts collecting the ideas for the NWO, and then that's his return, and then they beat the shit, like maybe Hogan comes out to save Macho. And then there's like that's the start of the NWO. I don't feel like it would have started out with as much heat, but I feel like the NWO stuff would have went downhill less fast.
Okay.
If Brian Pillman
slower is the word, by the way.
Yes, I'm from Florida, you know. So I feel like you know what I'm saying. Like there's like I feel like if Brian Pillman is in there with Nash and Hall, even though Nash and Hall are just trying to do stuff, like wherever they see the money, they're kind of like, and obviously they're getting older, so they were trying to do easier shit. But if you have like a workhorse like Brian was, I feel like there's less members in the NWO, not as quickly. There's less. Did I say that wrong too? There's less members in the NWO. There's maybe you get to like 99 and then you start bringing in when you're running out of story shit to do. But like I think, and like Sting and Pillman, like I think because even Pillman, somebody said that Pillman said that to them is where he saw himself as a WCW guy because he knew he couldn't get over in WWF because it's the land of the giants. And again, the same thing I said about Stone Cold is that there's Shawn Michaels is already doing the small man, I'm awesome, I'm beating all these big guys things. So why have another? You know, like I think he was smart enough to know that he wasn't going to get that spot.
Right.
So
I have to agree with you on the whole Brian Pillman NWO. I wouldn't have had him as the third member though. I would have had him as the fourth.
Instead of 6, or no, 6 was the 6th member, but instead of like you take that Sean Waltman spot.
Yeah. I would have had, and I wouldn't have had Hogan as the first one.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like I feel like Hogan, all those guys were in there, you know, heading towards easier matches, less time in the ring. So like I feel like that would have changed the dynamic and would have made it even more badass that they actually had like a guy they could sick on guys like Sean Waltman that could fucking work and like make it seem like even more legitimate than just big dudes coming in and beating the shit out of people.
That was my biggest complaint about the NWO is Hogan was the mystery member. I would have had, I mean, I know originally it was supposed to be Sting. Everyone knows that. I would have had Macho Man be the original one. Then you could have had Macho versus Hogan. Yeah. You know, then you bring Pillman in. You could have Sting versus Pillman. Then you could have had Macho and Pillman versus Sting and Hogan in a tag match. You know, it could have been intertwined. I just think because once Hogan got in there, I mean, how many matches did he have a year?
Dude, only on pay-per-view. He got paid extra for the pay-per-view, so you'd make sure he got a pay-per-view match.
To where Macho would wrestle on, you know, was it Saturday Night Main Event?
Yeah, Macho Man was clearly like, "Let me go, brother. I'm still 22 years old." And
well, because like, he had a point to prove to Vince, because Vince said that he wasn't going to be able to work anymore. He was only going to be an announcer. And that if I was Bischoff, I would have used that to my advantage. Like, no, this is going to be my mainstay guy of the heel faction.
I like that. I think it's and then you have, because people talk about, now we're sidetracked, but people talk about Sting and how, like, I mean, that Crow Sting is amazing and it holds an amazing part in my childhood. Like, it just great Nitro episodes. I was a huge WCW fan. I wouldn't change it for the world. But I feel like in your scenario, if you keep Sting as Surfer Sting, but you kind of reinvent the character to modernize it a little bit with Hulk Hogan kind of modernizing himself, but as a face still, I feel like that could have given Sting a couple more years. I also feel like that could have given WCW a couple more years, because when they really went down, they couldn't rely on those guys, and that's what they relied on.
Mm-hmm.
Once they started booking, I mean, people complain that they never booked other people, but when they did, it was such shit that it was like, well, why book other people, you know? Like,
right. I mean, do you really want to see a Ernest Miller Glacier match?
Absolutely not. And also, I remember, because I was a huge Buff Bagwell fan as a kid, because I thought it was
I'm sorry.
No, I love the Blockbuster. I think it's a great move.
It was an innovative move.
And I feel like I remember, because when 99 happened and everybody started leaving and everything started going to shit, they tried to push Buff. And like you had like maybe like I was maybe like 5% of fans, because I remember getting that same reaction as a child too. Like, why are you a Buff? So I feel like they pushed him, and then the crowd, and then it's just shit, and the crowd turns on. I'm like, that's why they didn't push other people.
Yeah, the crowd went mild real fast.
Yeah.
When Buff came out. I mean, but and I think, you know, I think me and Conrad Thompson are the only two that liked Buff Bagwell as the American males.
Oh, but that was a good tag team.
Yeah,
that was their. I feel like, because I was going to say this when we were talking about Flying Brian and Stunning Steve, is I felt like that tag team forced other tag teams to be a little flashier.
Mm-hmm.
Really, at the time, the most flashy tag team that you saw in WCW was Freebirds and like dynamic dudes were not over. They were they tried to be flashy, but they were not over.
They came in the ring in surfboards.
Dude, this will be the last thing that we get sidetracked with, but there's a Clash of Champions where they come out and they're not over. And their thing was like to pick a kid up and like give him a surfboard or like a skateboard and like take a picture and whatever. And they picked this kid. And whoever this kid is, I hope he's still a wrestling fan. I hope he's an adult that likes other adults like us bullshitting about wrestling. But he liked to eat. So
he was a bigger dude.
He was a big one. And
all right, let's just go. Well, okay, for the rest of the sake of the story, let's just call him Joe.
Okay, sure. Okay. So they go to pick up Joe. And Shane Douglas tries to pick up Joe. And he's struggling a little bit. So John Laurinaitis comes and fucking moves him. And this kid is not happy. Joe was having a bad day. Joe wanted to get picked up by Jim Cornette, but it wasn't happening. So Joe got turned away at the meet and greet from Jim Cornette, and he was. So this kid is just sitting there just pouting. And they're taking a picture with him. And then they have to struggle to put him back over. I had to rewind it so many times. I'm dying, dude. Like, yeah, those are just, dude, like, nobody can do it. The point I'm making is that, like, once you have, like, such a tag team that changes things so much, where, like, really, dude, like, you watch them come out, and it's flawless. I'll say Shawn Michaels again. You watch Shawn Michaels' entrances. Nobody ever talks about entrances, but you watch that guy come out to the ring. I don't need to see the match. I know he wants to kick somebody's ass, but he's going to have fun doing it. I don't need to see the match with the Hollywood Blondes. I know they're going to come out to the ring. They're badass. They're talking shit. They're in the fucking camera. They're like, dude, just all their shit looked seamless. Nuts. And the same with Brian's promo in ECW. Same with Steve's transition. I felt like Steve was also very graceful in taking all these shit gimmicks and finally finding that one and making it. I feel like both those guys, and now just speaking about it out loud, because we're on this part of the story where they're both going to WWF. I feel like now that I've seen that documentary, I kind of you see that all those ideas were Brian's and Steve was picking Brian's brain. It's almost like Steve fucking learned from Pillman, who's not a wrestling guy, how to fucking make his shit work so well that he became the next, like, he's surpassed a lot of things. Like The Rock is The Rock, but there's Stone, they go up and down like stocks, Stone Cold. Yeah. And like,
and it's, you said that, and it's like it was like almost like Brian mentored Stone Cold,
right,
and Steve a lot. And I mean, their run, once they get into the WWF, Stone Cold goes on to, as ringmaster, then he goes on and he wins the King of the Ring, which I think that was great, by the way, because ringmaster, King of the Ring. Then after that, Brian comes in and they immediately they work together.
Yeah. And that was smart too, because that was WWF making it obvious that you're like, it's like back then they never acknowledged the companies verbally, but you could tell they're like, well, that's what people want to see, right? That's what, like, so, and they have that they showed in the documentary where they first come in and like they're staring at each other, and I was watching the documentary. It wasn't even the show I was watching, and it's like 20 something years later. I was like, this is awesome. I would watch this show right now. Like,
yeah. And then you get, they work that, then they have the angle with the gun, which transcended wrestling TV. Like,
I love that segment so much. It's tailor-made for a redneck kid from South Florida.
You know what's crazy is that didn't even end the show, by the way.
No.
Everyone forgets that. It didn't end the show.
It didn't end the show. Everybody was freaking out about it. And like, it's just two guys doing, and I heard this story. I don't know how much of it is, I heard it on Bruce Pritchard's podcast, but I love that. I love thinking about this when they show that, is that I guess they kind of let them do their thing. They had a vague idea for what they were gonna do, and oh, sorry, I have to backtrack. I love Austin 316 is gonna meet Brian Pillman 9mm, and he just pulls it out. I don't know. Dude, it's so fucking good. But that glass, bro. They didn't change the glass on his door, so it was real like it's a door for a house. It's got to meet code. It's got to somebody just can't break your glass. So like, dude, they don't tell neighbors. Neighbors are just hearing a large buff redneck man fucking just wailing on somebody's door, and somebody's screaming he has a gun, and dude, also it's the breaking of the door, Brian Pillman saying Brian Pillman 9mm, and Kevin Kelly reacting to it is so, oh my god, oh my.
You know what's great though?
Made it more real because it was so shitty, but like you felt like he was just so shocked that he didn't know what to do.
You know what's great is you those are your fun, your memories of that segment. My two memories are Brian Pillman's security guard standing out front and Stone Cold throwing one of them in a kiddie pool.
So they also don't know that's happening. So a man is physically assaulting someone in somebody's backyard.
He throws him in a kiddie pool, and I think it was like, wasn't it like mid-February in Ohio?
Super cold.
So it had to be like 30 degrees. They're in windbreakers, and there's just a kiddie pool full of water. Just throws them in. I was like, I love the whole segment. I remember the whole segment, but that's the key points. Like that's the key points. Like these two fat security guards are standing out front of his house, thrown in a kiddie pool.
I forget the promotion, but there's a Japanese wrestler with a gimmick where he pulls out a gun, but they work it to where like he pulls out a gun and then somebody else pulls out a gun, and then somebody else pulls out a gun, and then they fucking start grappling again, and it's like back to normal.
Well, I know we're gonna get off topic about this, but it's just fresh in my brain because I watched it yesterday on YouTube in 2016 or 17. I think it was 17. There was a wrestling promotion that started up. It was called what was it? Blackcraft Championship Wrestling. It was Blackcraft was a clothing company that like all like the deathmatch wrestlers bought, and everything like that. And it was put together by these two guys. They had Matt Justice was on there, G Raver was on there. You had a whole bunch of other people. They had a commissioner, right? Owner of the company was this gentleman by the name of Doug Bradley. Doug Bradley, if you're a horror flick fan, was Pinhead.
Oh, sick.
Okay.
That's why I was like, I know that name.
Yes. So they go and blah blah blah. They had the best month like promos for Matt Justice because the preacher, Doug Bradley was a preacher that owned the company, and the preacher wanted Matt Justice to join his cult, so they kept showing up to these independent like wrestling matches, and the last one is Justice is laying in the ring and they fold up the mat around him and they take him. So they have a great first show, sold out. It's in Pittsburgh in this old fucking like Gothic church. Paige's mom wrestled against Britt Baker. Yeah, bro, it was like insane. Then they go for WrestleMania weekend in 2017.
Paige's mom wrestles?
Yes, Saraya Knight.
Oh, wow.
So they go to WrestleMania weekend, and it was supposed to be I can't remember. I think it was Matt Justice Open Challenge or John Morrison Open Challenge or whatever for the belt. Oh no, it wasn't. It was okay. Yeah, I'm just gonna get you all fucked up on the story, but the one owner was like, "Oh, for the Open Challenge match, I got an idea." Oh, it was PCO. For PCO's Open Challenge match, I have an idea. And they're like, shoot, yeah, go ahead. And he goes, yep, shoot is the word. We bring in New Jack. PCO no sells all of his moves. New Jack gets pissed, pulls a gun out, points it at PCO, and have the special effects where the gun actually fires and shoots a muzzle round. And PCO has like animatronics where he starts bleeding.
Oh, like the pop things that they do.
Yes. And New Jack go for the cover and PCO kick out. I was like, what? I gotta send you that documentary. It was probably one of the best wrestling documentaries I've ever seen.
Please do, because I can actually tie this in with Brian Pillman and why I like guys like this so much, why I like Owen so much, why I like a lot of the guys I like are based off of these guys come from legit backgrounds. Brian Pillman came from the dungeon. Owen came from the dungeon. Fucking, but they had fucking sense of humor, dude. Like you get in that environment, and like especially back then, like I can't even imagine. Like being in and out of locker rooms now, like you hear from veterans and stuff how night and day it is. But I can't imagine being in that locker room. So you just have to, dude. You have to fucking have some fun, dude. Like I'm the biggest proponent of. That's why I love that idea of killing the business. I am all about the fucking 60-minute Broadways. I am all about the fucking funks and the NW. I love watching that shit. I got into wrestling when I was very young because I came from a family that watched a lot of sports. So wrestling and WCW and NWA and all that stuff was like a sport, dude. Like no top, like rules and fucking nobody was nobody worked on a dump truck. Nobody was a goon. Like there was no like. That's why I got really
Bill Irwin, the goon. Oh, come on, his wrestling boots were ice skates,
dude, and he would drop the gloves when he did his fucking but dude, you like have fun with it. That's also the part of the reason why I started really liking wrestling. It's because it was sports, but you can have fucking fun with it. And like that shit is fun. Like it has its place. I'm not saying do that at WrestleMania. I'm not saying disrespect certain people. I'm not saying, but when the parties involved are down to, especially now when like I hated when like I forget what year it started, but it was after, I feel like it was after 2010 because I kind of took a break in like 08, 09 because it was just getting really bad. And then when I was in college, I would peek in here and there and I would watch a pay-per-view with my brother and they would do the fucking title matches first or they would throw it on. And I was just like, don't do that. Why the fuck would you do that? And because I'm a huge Triple H guy and I remember everything Triple H was like, that goes last. That it shits on everybody. It shits on Ric Flair. It shits on Dory. It shits on Terry. It shits on, like, there's places for that. But I hate the absolute just stonewall. Don't do any of that shit. Dude, that shit's hilarious. Kicking out, dude, especially in when you say 2016?
Yeah.
Absolutely do that in 2016. If you do that in 1992, okay, I get it. But like there's things to do. They did stuff in 1992 that was ridiculous too. Like, I mean, if you watch anything from the 80s, Boogie Woogie Man, like that's fucking absurd. Like, there's places for it, obviously.
You say Boogie Woogie Man, Jimmy Valiant. He just had his final match. It was like 60 or 57 years or 58 years in the wrestling business, and he just had his final match. It was a steel cage match.
Yeah, of course it was. Did he wear a mask?
I was like, I saw that on social media, and I'm like, what? Like, why?
Because those guys are insane, dude. Those guys are insane. But that's what I'm saying. It's like you got guys like you back to this gun thing. That's absurd. But you said it didn't close the show. It was like, hey, look at this crazy shit. These guys are, because even at the time, like Stone Cold wasn't having his title run. I think that was actually before the
IC title. It was before the IC title.
He was regularly working, so he wasn't hurt, and he was doing that with Brian. So that was like, oh, I just watched Ahmed Johnson have a match, and now I'm gonna watch. I want to switch over to WCW, but what's Brian Pillman gonna do? Oh, he has a gun. Sick. I'm down. Like
an Ahmed Johnson match.
Dude, come on, you watched 97. Like, I love how people regard 97 as their favorite year for WWF because it was really like the start of the Attitude Era. But you forget, like, I think even Joe made this point. I made a joke about Joe earlier. That wasn't Joe at the Clash of Champions getting picked up by the Dynamic.
It was just a kid named Joe
that looked like Joe. But to Joe's credit as an adult, he said, "Fuck, that made me lose my train of thought." So anyway,
it was Ahmed Johnson.
Yeah. Like, dude, you watch the Attitude. Oh, it's great. Oh, it's awesome. Oh my god. But dude, no, it's not. It's really not. Like, the main events are awesome. Some of the angles are awesome. But then you're watching DOA versus Ahmed Johnson. And then the next week you're watching Ahmed Johnson versus DOA. And you're like, please stop this. Please. Right. Why does WCW have such a huge roster? And I've watched more Ahmed Johnson matches this week than a fucking.
You're watching Funaki and Takamichinoku Choppa Choppy Pee Val Venus,
which is also great, which is amazing. And that's one of my favorite sets of the kid too. It's fucking hilarious. And they're like, dude, yeah, the Attitude Era is nuts. And that was actually when it started becoming better. Like, that was like late 98. So like, I'm just ragging on Ahmed Johnson at this point. Ahmed Johnson was gone, so it was better.
He was Mr. T, wasn't he, or just T in WCW?
Yeah, because they did the Harlem Heat 2000.
Yeah, I think he looked like a 2000. Let's just say that.
He was way in 2000. They should do a Dark Side of the Ring for Harlem Heat 2000, not because anything controversial happened, but just so bad.
Give him more TV time.
Never mind. They shouldn't do another Dark about Harlem Heat 2000. Sorry. Do it about Booker T. Actually, Booker T, I think, had Booker T had his, but it wasn't wrestling. He grew up in a rough upbringing, but that was the only,
But during the gun situation, did he already have the accident?
Yeah. No, that's why. I think before he actually started working for them, he had an accident because they were still because he thought he wasn't going to get the contract.
Right.
His sister is talking about how he was in the hospital bed and he was like, I fucked up because he wanted the crazy strength and conditioning coach / agent who's like trying to get him all this money, and he wanted all that money for his kids. And obviously he clearly had some different things going on where he spent a lot of money on other things. So I think he really thought he really fucked up. So I think that's why he went even like, because they don't go into, do they? Whose like legit idea that was? I think it was a collaboration of a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like if Brian doesn't have that accident, that's another reason I said, what if Ruthless Aggression, Brian Pillman is like, I feel like if he doesn't have that accident, he still has like what I was saying about, I'm trying to like make this make sense as a linear. So what I was saying about Stone Cold learning from Brian, I think what Stone Cold learned from Brian was to have the balls to just throw some ridiculous idea out there that works for you. In case they say yes, the worst they're going to fucking say is no. You can still work. You know they're going to send you out there to do whatever they want you to do. So say some crazy shit and see any story you ever hear about Vince McMahon, and you even hear it today, like with guys that are training and trying to get into WWE, they a lot of the guys that I've been to seminars with and stuff like that pop Vince. JR tells that story about Brian Pillman coming up at the party and be like, hey, motherfucker, like just fucking pop Vince. So like, and then the strength and conditioning coach said, what do you do with horse? Dude, it was too much. I had to rewind that part a couple of times. I thought it was fucking, this guy's so intense. Like, I wish he was a booker or like a manager or something. Like, that guy's so amazing. They should get him at CCW. Get that strength.
Yes.
But, so I think Stone Cold had that even more confidence than he already did because of Brian, and he was able, even after Brian was gone, you look at a lot of stuff that Stone Cold did, and it's very Brian Pillman-esque. It's when he took his ball and went home, when he got pissed about other stuff, when he would be very abrasive about ideas and stuff. I feel like that was all Brian, and I feel like Brian, without that accident, has that same confidence all the way until he retires, because that was really the main injury. He had always had injuries, but really the injuries from the accident were the reason he wasn't gonna really work that much longer.
I mean, when he came back, he wrestled Goldust and he got hurt again.
And yeah, dude, that's painful to watch. And you don't notice it as a fan. I actually watching this documentary because you know the angle and you know Brian Pillman's story. So like I always just assume that that's how they worked the match. So he could like that was stuff Brian did because that was what he felt safe doing. And he knew how to work it to where he can fucking sell it, but not really fuck himself up.
Well, he sold it even before the match. Cause remember he came down with a cane.
Right.
So he always twirled the cane. So you were like, oh, maybe something is wrong with his foot, and
but
everything
again, like that. You're thinking that's just like that's like a little bit like maybe that helps him, like it gives his leg a little break before he has to go for 10, 15 minutes. But
like a Willy Wonka.
I'm sorry, you're not seeing my face, ladies and gentlemen, because the idea of Brian coming to the ring all badass with a cane and then going to the center of the ring with a cane and then just falling back like Willy Wonka and then just fucking whipping up or something. Dude, somebody has to do that now. If somebody has a gimmick with a cane, please fucking do that. But dude, yeah, so I always thought, even like as a guy that kind of is into like the behind the scenes of the business and all that stuff, I always thought that was just that was something Brian agreed to because that's how he felt like he could sell it and kind of not blow himself up or hurt himself in the ring. But dude, finding out that he was just going hard because he was like, fuck it. Like, it's crazy to me. But that goes like, that's the thing. Like, I feel like that accident really, like I said, like we were talking about like his in-ring work, like as far as the worker he was, great worker, but he had a specific style to work, which I really feel like the WWF from 97 going forward, they just added more people that would absolutely complement that style. Like a lot of WWF was really good at having great matches in that time, but with the Gaga.
Yep.
Now it was almost like a perfect balance of circling and this bullshit. But then when they really got down to it, it was psychology and that was very important to them. So I feel like his work style would have carried him through, and especially after 2000 when they don't really start really taking care of guys in the WWE until like 06, 07. But I feel like they started a little bit after a lot of there was a lot of publicity stuff that happened in between in the 2000s that they were trying to get away from, and they were being publicly traded. So I feel like his career, I feel like he honestly could have had a retirement match with Shawn Michaels when Shawn Michaels did that run in 03, 04 is what I feel like the length. I don't think he could have went further than that, but because I think he would have gotten some very real injuries along the way. Right. But I feel like his confidence would have carried him to like a no doubt Hall of Famer. But that accident fucked up the confidence he has. Because you look at Stone Cold, you look at his run, he really stops wrestling at like his retirement match is WrestleMania 19's 03, right?
Yeah.
And you still have memories of Stone Cold for the next 6 years. Solid ones of him stunning people, running out, doing shit. Like
his last WrestleMania was Scott Hall, right?
No, it was the one that was 18, and then he did because The Rock comes out and says he's never beat Stone Cold at a WrestleMania, and he challenges him, and then they have that WrestleMania 19 match, which I don't really like that WrestleMania. That's probably one of my favorite matches at that WrestleMania. That and Chris Jericho versus Shawn is definitely a great match. But yeah, dude, I feel like Stone Cold, the attitude and the success that Stone Cold was able to have for the rest of his career was the confidence that Brian would have had if he had not had that accident.
Yeah, and I mean, I couldn't agree more, because there's so many, that we go back to this. There's so many what ifs. Like we can play a what if game. What if Brian didn't get hurt? He could have been one of the 5th members of the Radicals.
And did a turn where he goes to DX after the screw job.
Yeah, or he could have had great matches with Chris Benoit outside of WCW. I think he would have had a hell of a match with Saturn. Him and Saturn could have had a feud that lasted months. Instead of that, Saturn dropped.
He was a dungeon guy. I feel like that would have actually helped Saturn not end up with a mop. But
right, and wear a dress.
Yeah, like I feel. Well, I mean, maybe he would have done that anyway. But I feel like they would have had because he's a Stu Hart guy. So like, he can keep up with guys like that. And he probably, the older he got, he probably would have preferred to do like grappling and like really like technical matches, because that saves you, that lets you hold, that lets you sit, that lets you fucking, it's not as much like, I feel like that would have been a whole different aspect of his career. But unfortunately, what you got the gun thing, and I felt like the which, I mean, that's where it ends, is with his feud with Goldust. But I felt like that was really legitimizing Goldust. There was like as a kid, obviously I didn't notice it, but growing up and learning and looking at the behind the scenes of the time, I feel like Goldust. I mean, Goldust figured out a way to get over regardless, but I feel like in the eyes of the office, that gimmick was a little dangerous for them.
Yeah.
So I feel like that whole having somebody else just as crazy, but like not as like it's not flamboyant.
Androgynous.
Yeah. So not as androgynous, but like the same kind of like counterintuitive, but like it just as crazy. So I feel like that would have really turned into like a way bigger thing.
Well, I mean, if you remember how it started, is Brian Pillman had interest in Marlena.
Well, because that was a shoot too.
Yeah. And he stole Marlena from Goldust. So Goldust dropped that flamboyant character for a little bit. He was still Goldust, but he just wasn't as flamboyant, and it showed a different side of Goldust.
You remember the I mean, you obviously do, but like you like what are your thoughts on the like he kidnapped her, basically, was the angle. He kidnapped her and he forced her, and they were playing on this thing where she was into it though, or she was just fucking with Goldust, but like also she like had her hair slicked back and she was like dressed different, like they did all this dark, borderline dark shit. Do you think that's not a big deal today? Because I literally, they didn't even mention that in the documentary, but maybe Goldust didn't want to, I don't know, but that is trumped by the gun gimmick, because I feel like they're both just as dark.
I mean, it is, because I mean, you don't see on live TV someone pulling a gun out,
right? But you also see on live TV somebody defending themselves for kidnapping somebody's wife.
I mean, I've seen a lot of police chases with carjacks and people still in the car, but
I guess grew up in that cops era. We're just like,
But I mean, that Marlena like storyline was pretty. I mean, like you said, it was pretty like raunchy, because they would go back to the first started off in like a hotel room or a bedroom, and it looked like he was forcing himself on top of her. Then like towards the next, you see she was going along with it, and everything.
Right. She still looks like kind of brainwashed, and she's still like, dude, you could tell like there's always certain times where you could tell JR is trying to do his best, but he feels like it's not the right course of action. Like I don't think he did it in the gun thing. I think but I think there were times where they're commenting on like the promo, and like then they cut to the video, and like I don't think JR was about it, which makes it even more real, But yeah, that was super dark, and I feel like that had to, again, if he's healthy, I feel like that culminates in a really awesome like fucking cage match, or like some match where it's just insane. But he couldn't work that way, so it was just it was weird, because you remember it and you're like, they're going so dark and so hard, but for like a mid-card thing, like that's the only thing about that, like, because I thought that was great, and unfortunately that's obviously they don't even get to finish it out, because he wears the dress, and then does he even wear the dress? He's supposed to wear the dress, and he didn't show it. I mean, we're done with basically Brian Pillman's run, and we'll talk about a couple things here and there, but I feel like we really need to unpack certain characters in this, because I still want to talk about, I was really happy with what Brian Pillman Jr. said. I was really happy with what the daughter said, and how even keeled they are. The one daughter seems a little still, you can tell, like
she's standoffish a little bit about
she holds on to some trauma, but I feel like she's because of who her mother was. They all had different mothers, so I feel like her mother was, I think she got it from both sides, which was really unfortunate. And then the stepdad part, but like, I obviously want to unpack the fucking coach, but like the coach, the sister is an amazing human being. Like it was like held her shit. Like obviously takes care of everybody. Like even you could tell when she was talking about Brian and like the hospital room and all the stuff that where she had facial expressions where even you could tell like back then when it was actually happening and he was alive, she would get upset with him and be like the bigger sister and be like, why are you fucking doing it?
And you know what's crazy is you said about the sister being so like genuine and just pick up the pieces when it's all said and done. You know, Brian outside the ring, it was documented on this episode. Brian outside the ring was a playboy. He
Right.
got around.
Yeah, because she just chuckles. She's like, they all got different mothers.
Yeah. And he met this, this one smoke show. He finds out that she's pregnant. They get married or they're together or something like that. Brian's out on the road and he meets a stripper.
Yeah.
And so it, but he still took care of that first kid.
Took care of all of them. Took care of them.
It's even though he knew he fucked up, he had to take care of that kid.
Yeah. And I feel like I feel like the sisters' personality, like you can tell they grew up in the same house. It sounds like Brian was very much the same, very able to take responsibility for his actions and do what he needed to for his family. Obviously, he liked to make a lot of bad decisions, and the sister was more the even keeled person. But they seem very much the same, where they know what's important, which is really why I feel like those kids, both sisters, and the son, and Brian Pillman Jr. are so able to fucking be awesome is because of her. And I want to talk more. I do like. I feel like that's a huge part of the episode because I also feel like a huge part of the episode is Melanie. Like they started painting her a little negatively, but I feel like she redeems herself a little bit. I know she's in the same boat as Brian where she feels like she fucked up because she was obviously on drugs and stuff like that, and that was she was a very self-destructive person. But I feel like they evened her out. I was very much waiting for them to just paint her as like fucking awful and all this shit.
You started to allude on that is the really good looking daughter. I mean she was very pretty.
The one where the mom was the one that killed herself.
Yes, what was her name? Kristen or something like that. She was very pretty.
Beautiful.
She paintbrushed Melanie like, oh well, she forced it because of all the drugs and alcohol. She's just a terrible person. It was like a paintbrush slap, like and
I mean,
you thought
you're entitled to feel that way. Like the only one that's entitled to really feel the other way is Brian, and he does. He ended with that where he's like, dude, what am I gonna do? Like I don't like
right, yeah, and and it comes full circle. That's just how it is, and now when you go into you further it. I know you said that you want to do a second part of this, but
I mean, we just keep going.
no, that's Brian Jr. I mean, we watched Brian when we were younger. The way Brian Jr. moves in the ring, his attitude, his mannerisms. Yes, he is bigger than Brian Pillman, but he's just the match that he just had him and Griff Garrison against the Young Bucks for the tag belts was absolutely, I mean, phenomenal.
And the more he grows into an actual character, because he's so young in the business, it's just going to be more and more. And I feel like the awesome thing about that, and the thing that I really liked is that he's able to hold his own when he talks about stuff like that, is that you get the sense that the more experience he gets in the ring, if they bring to him some sort of angle where he's like his dad, he would totally be down to do it. And it would kind of be like an old, like he'd be all good with it.
Yeah, it's crazy as we follow him on social media, and I think it was last week or the beginning of this week, it was Brian Pillman's birthday, and Brian Jr. had an indie show in Pennsylvania, and he was wearing that old loose cannon,
Yeah.
The tiger print shirt, and he goes, "Repping this for you, Dad, on the indie show for your birthday." It's like
Fucking sick.
Dude, that's so awesome.
You don't do that enough, dude. I had a buddy at Dory's that would on Chris Candido's birthday, he would wear his title belt over his neck and do the
man, like that's another one. Can you imagine Chris Candido and Brian Pillman?
Dude, yeah. It's fucking crazy. But maybe we don't need it. Well, I mean, we kind of just unpacked it, but yeah, dude, it's crazy how that unfolded, but it's weird. Like you watch the documentary and there's that you don't like I don't know about you, but I felt like I watched it and I got the full story. I feel like they didn't fuck with you. I feel like they didn't hold anything back. They showed the mom. They showed how the kids feel about the mom. They did all that stuff, and they didn't pull back on Brian's story. There's the sister was very matter of fact about Brian, and you didn't leave with oh, why the fuck was he like that? Like you leave a lot of these like we were talking about Vince McMahon, like points in Vince McMahon's life where we're like, what the fuck? Like you leave the Owen one, obviously. At least I do, because I'm like, you didn't need to do that. I said it in the episode. You didn't need to have him do that.
Right.
You didn't need him to fall from the sky. So why fucking do it? But Brian, it's very much that he did a lot of things to himself, and it's unfortunate. But I mean, you got what you got, and that's why he was so good. Is because you got what you got.
He was the loose cannon.
Yeah.
So.
And that's it, folks. You get what you get.
Yeah, what you get.
So we'll leave it as a cliffhanger. I'll do this. I'll do this, Chris. I'll blame next time you see us, whether you're happy about the next episode or not, we'll blame Joe. So we'll ask Joe, does he want to see a second episode of Brian Pillman where we unpack the specific characters? We can get into a little of the wrestling, but I feel like we'd have fun going back and forth. And or we can do I really want to do the Von Erichs episode from the season. We can also do the Nick Gage, who I didn't even know who that was, but I saw it, and holy fuck! And my favorite wrestler is Terry Funk, and I love hardcore wrestling, so I would be so down to do that one. But there you go, those three, Joe, 3 of them.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that Nick Gage one.
Well, that was a really good conversation. Number 2, good conversation. We will see you next week. Check us out on Spotify, as you can listen to Joe talk about
our latest episode is James Creed.
James Creed is an amazing human being, an amazing wrestler. Look out for him.
Big shout out to James Creed. I don't know if you're watching this far into our episode, but sentimental moment. When it was released, I took a screenshot and I tagged him in it on Facebook, and I said, "Hey man, look, your episode's up." And I guess it was his mom shared it, and she wrote this long thing like, "Your grandparents would be proud of you. People are seeing you in other states and everything like that." It was really cool, to see that. And I messaged him. I said, "Hey man, you're going places, bro. Like you're really, really going places." And what's great is I think in a couple weeks in Chicago, Cha-Cha Charlie is going to wrestle up there, and it's on the same card with James Creed.
Fuck yeah, dude. Cha-Cha wrestles up there, and I am in Chicago, which is wonderful, and I love that city. And I used to live there, actually, and it's a great wrestling town. Fucking awesome wrestling town. Obviously, a lot of the bigger shows have happened, but that's what you get with Chris and Chris. And I just thought of it, you ended. We love wrestling, and so should you.
Ooh.